Welcome to FMRPG, the tabletop role-playing game podcast that doesn't just stick to the surface level, but we try to tackle the serious subjects along the way, have a little fun maybe. I'm Richie Buzzkill, and tonight, and this morning, depending on the time zone, which of the guests we're talking to, we had Nolan back again. What's up, Nolan?
Not much. Doing well.
All right. The Lady Kayla is back from her castle. What's up, Kayla?
Hi, everyone.
And we've got a special guest, a longtime contributor, first time, I believe, on the show, Ben Rogers. Thank you for being on the show.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. And, well, good morning this from the UK, at least, and happy Easter as well.
Yeah. Well, praise zombie Jesus. I say longtime contributor because you've been one of the heavy Discord users, and I enjoy every time we have a chat on the Discord. So, and later on, you're going to be answering probably one of your own questions. So.
Yeah, that's karma coming round, isn't it? I'm sure.
Well, exactly. So, what have you been playing lately? Go ahead. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, sorry. When RBK said having you on, I said, who? He said, oh no, we're from the Discord. I said, oh, great.
Yeah.
There's a story with the handle that goes back quite a few years, so maybe we'll get onto that at some point.
Okay. So what have you been playing lately, Ben?
Well, our regular group, we're very fortunate. I have a weekly group, and we have been playing, as will come to no surprise to anybody who follows my comments and mad rants on the Discord channel. We recently wrapped up a short Fading Suns campaign, and we've now gone back to one of our old favourites of the Star Wars, the FFG, or now Edge Studios Star Wars game. We kind of do a mix of all three games: Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, and Force and Destiny. So we've got a group who are ne'er-do-wells running a ranch on an outer rim planet. So it's not a starship-based game. They're all in the same location, and it's put a different bit of a feel on it. But it's very, very Western in style, leaning into those kind of tropes, and a bit of Kurosawa samurai stuff going as well. So that's good fun.
Oh yeah, that's very nice. That's very much a throwback to the origins of the Star Wars as young Lucas watched the excellent movies in his local cinema and was able to steal all the plots and mix them together and make Star Wars.
Well, if he did it, then why not we do the same? So.
Well, I was quoted. I was the great artists steal some of them whole cloth. So excellent. Nolan, what have you been playing lately?
Not a whole lot. I've been playing in your Morkborg game.
Cyborg.
Cyborg. Sorry, Cyborg game. After we all got killed, my new failed child is leading the group. I'm sure that can never go wrong. Well, they're always sure they have the right plan. And
right. Well, also the fact that your new character almost got killed by your old character.
That's definitely true.
Because the weirdness that is in Cyborg, unlike Morkborg, where the world ends and you burn the book, when the world ends in Cyborg, you reset the timeline back to the first game. So I TPK'd the first player characters, and then we started new characters, and it was all the same world. So they ended up at the same location where the first players got TPK'd. But not, but they shot the contact. They didn't shoot the player characters, but definitely like the eye rolls I could hear through the screen was
No, it was good. It was
pleasing, pleasing.
No, we liked it. Yeah, we thought we were making a nice, safe delivery, and then gunfire. Whole place is under attack, and
So yeah, and Kayla, what have you been up to?
Just the same old with lots and lots of D&D mixed in with some cyborg with you. So we did just wrap up one of the D&D campaigns. So looking forward to seeing where that ends up going next. I think that DM is going to run another D&D session, but this time it like set in the Polynesian Islands. So that'll be a nice change of pace from Icewind Dale, which was cold and depressing and just harsh all around.
A little warmer feel next time,
Yeah.
right?
Like, let's go on vacation, guys.
Yeah. Well, I've been running Cyborg, and yeah, that's been a lot of fun. But I've also playing in Delta Green, and last session, we basically had a TPK on a train in Ukraine. So like, we were trying to transport a prisoner exchange. This is 2016, so it's before the war. But we were trying to prisoner exchange for one of our Delta Green guys for one of the White Room Russian spies, and I guess we were not on it, but we were never trained operatives in any way. We were a bunch of computer scientists, and like, it was somewhat Call of Cthulhu characters being in Delta Green. It was like an EPA inspector, a journalist, this kind of computer scientist, and this kind of computer scientist, all acting in a Delta Green scenario. So we weren't exactly trained operatives, as it were. But basically, we had been made by both sides, and one side started shooting just as the other side started making us all feel sick. And rather than try and have a gunfight with the people that were coming up the train, I decided to jump off the train after our prisoner. And after 3 rolls, there was a 15% chance I was just going to insta die, and I rolled a 12. And then the other character, who also jumped off the train with me, rolled a 10. So dead. Yeah, so we're going to make new characters. I think we're going to continue. We might go, because the journalist got captured, and maybe the EPA got captured, but like, he probably should have died just in his sleep. So yeah, so that's Delta Green, everybody. Yeah, so that's what I've been up to. And it's kind of gonna be an awkward transition because I got nothing to go to, because our topic tonight is talking about superheroes, RPGs, and why they're not so popular. You would think with the popularity of superhero comic books, movies, TV shows, and pretty much being trillion dollar enterprise per year, that superheroes would be a much more popular tabletop exercise. And but we've been looking around, and it's certainly there. There's many fine RPG tabletop superheroes games, but not really showing up in the numbers, right, Nolan?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I dug up a Roll20 report. They used to do an industry report. They don't anymore, but back in 2021, the Q4 report, listed all the breakout of all the games on Roll20, and it's like shockingly low. 0.44% of them are things I categorize as real, true superheroes. There's a bunch of stuff in here, like, of course, Roll20, when you assign your campaign or whatever, you can put it as like uncategorized or custom system or, some of these other things. So there may be some of that that's super stuff, although some of that may also be just more D&D or something like that, right? Uh, but and some people may be using more generic systems like Fate or GURPS to play supers, but things that are clearly supers are like less than 0.5% according to what shows up on here. And the majority of that is mutants and masterminds. You got Marvel Heroic, Hero Systems Champion stuff, that kind of thing are the big ones there.
But I mean, it's the same thing with. I mean, I tried to contact roll drive through RPG to ask them, but they were unwilling to give any statistics in any way, or even without numbers. And I think the Roll20 going behind the curtain sort of has something to do with their partnership. But
Yeah,
go ahead.
the thing that's interesting here is, you know, other genres that aren't, obviously D&D is and all kinds of fantasy is like the vast majority of stuff on here, but other, genres are not hard to find on here. Like horror, like Call of Cthulhu is like 10% of all games on, Roll20, and there's a bunch of other horror games on here, so I can pick out. And definitely sci-fi is well represented on here. Starfinder is one of the early ones, right? So it's surprising to me that we don't see more supers, again, given how popular they are in media and how popular they've been for a long time.
Well, let's talk about, because we've all played superhero RPGs at one point or another, and that I think that somewhat belies this number. I feel like is way lower than I would have even expected. But Ben, one of the reasons I brought Ben on is because he was talking about his Marvel superhero games, but I know he's into Aberrant and a couple other things. So Ben, what is your kind of history with superhero RPGs?
Well, it kind of goes back. I think it comes back to, as a kid, age 4, I was into the Batman, the 60s Batman series, the Incredible Hulk TV show, the Super Friends cartoon, all of that saturated tiny brain. And so I was a huge superheroes fan from tiny age. And so after I'd started to get into RPGs, and I picked up Imagine magazine, and there was a one-page spread advert of the Marvel Superheroes RPG, the original. They call it the face rip system. Face rip being the characteristics: fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche. And I still remember it all.
Nice.
And that was kind of another light went on. It was like, oh, you can do supers with this hobby. Oh, great. But it took a while to actually track down and get a copy of the Face Rip game. And from then, I kind of always did superhero gaming. I mean, I ran a game last weekend for the first time in ages of Marvel superheroes. And I think, from my perspective, I think a part of it is why it's not, or why it wasn't bedded into the industry for a long time, was that it was seen as kid stuff. And a lot of the hobby always seemed to be trying to get away, trying to be mature, trying to be more adult. This is a serious hobby. We're not just playing pretend. And I think that particularly it's only been in the last sort of decade, really, that superheroes have become that bit more mainstream. And I think they've always seen as somewhat childish in a way. And I think that that's part of why there is a kind of reticence to the industry basically grabbing onto it, because superhero games at their root, it's power fantasy in its literal form. You are superheroes. You can do the amazing things. You can, save the world. You can rescued a kitty from the tree, but it hasn't kind of separated from that childhood root to a certain extent. And I think that it's always been playing catch up because of that.
Yeah, and let's. I'll ask Kayla. Kayla, you've played some superhero RPGs. These are some wonderful points. We're getting back to those. By the way.
Yeah, I've played Masks. That's like my experience with the superhero, which is the Powered by the Apocalypse superhero genre, where like it's kind of geared towards you are playing younger people. Like that's the idea, right? You're in like high school probably. It's more of like the coming of age tale of how do you like navigate your superpowers and also like your social responsibilities and that sort of thing. So it almost kind of reflects what Ben's saying there of like definitely geared more towards like this younger idea. But when you brought up or when we started talking about this topic in general, it was just kind of like serendipitous that I was putting together a talk on like why it's important for like us to recognize the cultural importance of superheroes anyways, because from like the therapy side of things. So like I'd already been pulling numbers and yeah, like it's crazy to think that it is so popular in other formats, right? So like we can see like Publishers Weekly reports on comic book sales and see how much that substantially jumped even in like 2021 from I don't know if that was like pandemic impacted, but like from 2019 to 2021 it jumped 70%. So yeah, they were like I think that they were reporting like $2.075 billion of revenue from that. So people are reading comics for sure. Not granted, that includes more than just superheroes, right? There's comics on many other things, but um heavily superhero focus. And then like we look at Marvel Cinematic Universe. Geez, oh Pete, like that thing is just a giant. I think I was looking at the Harvard Business Review, and that was like just reporting 2019 numbers, so they're a little behind the times with those number reporting. But like of the 22 movies that were out in that time period, they had grossed over 17 billion and averaged 64 nominations for awards per movie. So 22 movies times $17 billion is a lot of money that those things are pulling in. So there's clearly like that demand and popularity. So it's interesting to me because like we see adults clearly engaging with the comic book realm and with the like Marvel Cinematic Universe, and like I'm sure television shows and DC Comics can like also come into uh that talk as well. But like then we go back to Nolan's point of like just 0.4% or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, oof, that's interesting that we're seeing such big popularity over in these realms and just like such a tiny little bit
Yeah.
in the role playing realm.
Yeah, and it there's I think Mask's subtitle is Mask the Next Generation, right? So
The
it's
new
the new
generation.
generation. So it's about the kind of legacy characters or the characters that are coming up after superheroes are established or whatever. And we'll get deeply into Masks, I'm sure, eventually. But Nolan, what have you played in the superhero genre?
Well, I played a few things. Long ago in high school, also the old TSR Marvel Phase Rip, the advanced one. This would have been in,
The late 90s?
94, late 90s, 94 to, 97, sometime in there. I think you even in high school played in one of my
Yes, I did
Marvel.
indeed play in a random mutant. It was Mutant High School. We were playing random mutants, and somehow, unlike every other random mutant in Marvel superhero Phase Rip, I actually got like two or three powers that were about water, so
Yeah.
I was on the swim team.
Yeah,
So
the
like,
Ultimate Powers
Yeah,
guide
no,
had a tremendous
if your
table.
powers, guys, if your powers aren't completely random, you are not playing Face Rip.
right.
Come on.
I
Well,
agree.
I just ran. I was really lucky. I was really lucky to roll it. I
Agreed,
promise
yeah.
you, everyone else was terrible. Like,
Yeah, that was half the fun, was coming up with what your theme is now that you have this bizarre collection of, the ability to generate radiation and like fly and other half a dozen other things that didn't make any sense. But yeah, the Ultimate Power Sourcebook had that enormous table of like all the powers in the original book plus the ones in the extensions, and you just like rolled on this giant table. What kind of mutant you were, what kind of superhero you were, how did you get your powers? Well, it was a lot of fun. Somewhere in the middle there, during the kind of Forge era, I played a Supers game called Capes. That's kind of a GMless thing. I think it's actually still in print, kind of, from Indie Press Revolution. But that's kind of a Forge GMless kind of scene setting kind of game like that. And of course, I've played Masks, so that's probably the vast majority. I mean, I've definitely sat in a Champions game at a con at one point, but
I'm sorry.
Not-
I mean, I don't know, but that's the reputation of Champions is not the best. But
yeah, those
it
guys
could be
were real
great.
mad I didn't have a character because they were there to like do.
Oh, they were
Yeah.
there to really power game. Okay.
Yeah, they were there to they knew it, and like they knew no one else in the world liked it except them, and they were there to play.
Right.
I was not helping them. I tried to have a good time. Some of them, they were just not encouraging to me.
Right. I played Phase Rip, I played Masks, and I also ran, and we talked about it on the show before, Hit the Streets and Defend the Block, which was a little indie story game. We had a lot of fun with this. Kind of like there's some randomness, but it's also like kind of make the story up as you go. So, and you're supposed to be in this low area, and you're supposed to defend lower end part of the city, and you defend it because you live there, right? But yeah, I think that's kind of weird and I was like, oh, I should look at my shelves and see what else I have, and I'm like, man, I don't have a lot, and that's weird because I love superheroes. I mean, I'm much to the chagrin of people that think that they're trashy movies. I watch most of the Marvel movies. I watch most of the Marvel shows. I don't watch any of the DC shows, but those are not for me. So, but yeah, I think it does. I think as Ben was saying, like I think part of this has got to be kind of that like the first role playing game a lot of people play is like I'm Superman, no I'm Batman, no I'm Superman, which should be the next itch release. I think I should just write that just to see if I can get a DC takedown letter. But yeah, that's what the kids play: cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, and superheroes. Right? That's like the backyard. Or at least when I was a kid, that's what we played in the backyard. Right? I mean,
And I think that's it. I mean, I don't know if you can see, but there's shelves of superheroes games here, all of which I've played it and run at least once. And perhaps I'm still a man child, but I think it is a thing that there is almost there's kind of a conception that is a childish game, whereas you get something like D&D or even Scum and Villainy or a science traveler or a science fiction game. There is a kind of implicit, this isn't what I used to do, this is there is mainstream media, books, movies, etc., which for years has catered for adults in this space, and there is a perception that superheroes, there's geeky costumes, there's an atmosphere around it that I think puts people off, or that just doesn't occur to them. I don't even necessarily think it's kind of a malicious thing of looking down on that part of the hobby. I think it's just something that people don't necessarily associate superheroes with tabletop role playing instinctively, because that's not what they're familiar with. That's not the big names. That's not how they're introduced to it. Um, and yeah, I mean, look at last year when the Marvel announced their new role playing system, which comes out later this year. The How popular the playtest document was for that. Now, I can argue the merits or the lack of merits of the system, but there was a huge interest in that. And I think when that gets released later this year, we could see that topping the charts for a while, because it's a big name.
I think you're probably right, but I also, just reading that playtest document, because I of course downloaded it as well, like, it was not good.
Oh, it's
Like,
awful.
at all. Like, it was
Oh, it's
like,
dreadful.
it made me want to go like play any other Marvel game. And there were some Marvel games that were better and worse over the years. So like it was like, oh, it's a Chartapalooza, like, but not in a fun way, like the Phase Rip games. So like,
Mm.
and it may be down to, I mean, yeah, I think that the like people childish thought, people think superhero role playing is childish because that's what they played when they were kids, but also like it may just be we're waiting for the right game to come around. It's like that right moment for this
Mm.
thing to explode and become a thing. Or it could also be that the the power fantasy genre, which is what very much that's what superheroes is, been taken by D&D. So what else does superheroes come give you, right?
I don't know. I think that like part of it also goes into, D&D did pretty good at cornering the market. So like I talk to adults who really struggle to find gaming groups in general anyways. And so if they can get into a Dungeons and Dragons gaming group, which is again like the most popular right now, so easier to find, then that's kind of like
Mm.
getting pigeonholed right away. But I think Ben definitely brings up a good point there of like one of the harder things for getting, especially adults, into like the tabletop role playing games, especially if they are new to the genre or new to like this type of play, is getting past that idea of permission to play, right? Because us as adults feel weird, just
Mm.
like studies show, we feel weird when it comes to play. Like there's a lot of research into like why that is, and like feeling like we need to justify our playtime as like a productive thing, right?
Mm.
So like feeling like, oh, I'm going to go play football with the guys because, that's good for my health. Or I'm going to like run around on the soccer field because it's good for my health. Or I'm going to like sit down and play video games with my kid because it's with my kid, right? So adults kind of like have this weird need to justify their play already. And I wonder how much harder it is for their brains to justify, like, not only am I going to sit down and play this like tabletop role playing game that already like requires me to feel a little like maybe strange in engaging with the improv and trying on this new character, but also like now you're asking me to go back to like my younger years of like not I'm going to try on this character who's also a superhero, or like if you're in Masks, a superhero who's a teenager, and like that may be playing into that permission to play, maybe playing into it a little bit.
Mm. I think that's a
Yeah.
really valid point. And I think that one of the things, I think we've mentioned masks a couple of times. I think that masks almost comes in, rather than from a superheroes aspect, it's coming from the kind of kids on bikes type genre. And it's almost there, it's playing on the nostalgia of playing a younger character, your the trials of being a teenager. and you're a superhero. You know, that's the kind of like kids on brooms kind of, let's put, or even things from the Flood and things from the Loop. Let's put the genre aspect on it, so it's not just you riding around on a bike with your mates. That it's, you know, there's an element of the supernatural, the wondrous there, but it's still kind of almost the teen angst aspect of it, fighting injustice element of superheroes. And I think that, again, that's possibly part of the thing that has been a stumbling block for people playing superheroes games, is almost the concept that it's a very clear morality, that it's, you know, white hats versus black hats, good guys versus bad guys. Whereas a lot of other RPGs, the majority of other RPGs, the ethics and the morality are much more granular. You know, the cliche, the D&D party of the murder hobos. You know, one of the most, you know, the most popular of the current Star Wars RPGs is Edge of the Empire, where you're playing scum and villainy, you're playing smugglers, you're playing the underworld. That's, you know, the hyper-violent kind of thing that you get in a lot of role-playing games. You don't see killing people. Yes, that kind of ethical or moral clarity in that genre, I think sometimes might feel stifling to some people who are used to playing, you know, where they can just, you know, threaten, kill stuff, because a lot of it in those RPGs carries a penalty. You do those kind of things. There is a morality built into the system, karma in the classic Marvel game, and I think there was villain points, hero points in Mayfair's DC. It's been a long time since I ran that one, but you know, that structure is one that you know, can often feel to people who are used to just almost, you know, playing what they want to play, it can sort of be a bit off-putting or limiting and shackling.
Yeah, when you have the modern world, right? So the layers of separation between you stabbing a kobold in some sort of medieval pseudo weird fantasy world versus, okay, I'm playing Speedy McSpeederson and I'm going to run through a person because I'm just that kind of murder hobo player. It like, you know, the layers of separation between you and the thing you're doing are much less, and a lot of people, you know, like the karma points. I love the idea of the karma points, but it may actually have hurt the game because it's like intrinsically telling the game master to rein in the players from behavior that, you know, as teenagers or younger people just do because it's fun. Like, I'm just going to punch through this guy's head into another guy's head, and it becomes the boys, right? But is that intrinsically, I mean, it's not Marvel superheroes, but it's some other kind of superheroes, right?
Right, but that's the phase rip is emulating older comics, right? Where the comics code's enforced, and this, you know, that kind of stuff doesn't happen. And you know, you and I, RBK, are playing it just in the 90s, just as all the grim and gritty superhero stuff is coming in. So that's not like what you emulate, you know, yet. It's not. So that's maybe why it's got that kind of morality tone into it, because that's literally the genre they were emulating had that morality baked into it, right?
I think that I mean, there's one thing I will often say when I'm running a Supers RPG is, you know, are we doing a Comics Code Authority RPG setting or not? Because you know that, I mean, for a start, that will help you choose a system to use, but also, you know the framing, and you can change as a GM. You can change things like the karma penalties. You can put a different scale on it, etc. But I think that the mechanics of it aside, I think there is that kind of perception that, you know, we will be playing do-gooders. There is that kind of thing. The heroes are a certain cliche, and I think that sometimes, obviously it's an opinion and a sweeping statement here, but I think that sometimes that is the thing that puts people off a little bit. That you know, that am I going to have to be a hero? And I think that's where, Aberrant worked beautifully to create a setting where it wasn't initially first edition Aberrant, particularly. You're not playing superheroes, you're playing people with superpowers. And that will be the whole gamut. Some of those will wear costumes and they will defend a city or a nation, or, some will, you know, go off into the cosmos and explore strange new worlds. And others will just be really, really good at what they always did. And they'll be a phenomenal superpowered chef or a phenomenal superpowered lawyer or whatever. And then the story is about how do those superpowers affect society? How does that change the way we look at things? And that's a much more kind of mature way to address it. And it leans into things like Watchmen, the TV show Heroes, the Boys as well, to a certain extent. And the thing is, though, that because it is a unique and sort of more mature proposition, the people who came at it wanting a superheroes game kind of went, what's this? What am I meant to do with it? And other people who are looking to address those mature themes and those philosophical questions and ethical questions in RPGs are already looking at things like, the World of Darkness games, or, other things which have got a modern day mature theme. And it's like, do I want to mix superheroes in with this? And it becomes harder for those groups to intersect and relate to. But I think that, it is showing a maturing change in the way superhero media is presented. We've mentioned the Boys, we mentioned the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the CW shows for DC. They're all trying to put adult, mature, or more reasoned, relatable themes to that superhero. So we are getting a spread in the genre, but the games just don't seem to be kind of keeping up with that, or at least being sort of cresting that wave of that popularity. And I think part of it is that kind of, supers are, why should supers be for me? Why should I take what I'm playing off the table and put this on it?
Yeah, and I remember when Aberrant came out, I definitely bought it and digested it and wanted to play it and could not. I mean, we might have played it, but it was not a super memorable game. But trying to get other people interested in that game at that time, at the late '90s, early 2000s, was pretty difficult. I think if Aberrant had come out today, I think we'd be more ready for it. I know there's still printing some Aberrant stuff, and maybe a second edition, right?
Yeah.
Second
edition.
But once it's no longer a fresh idea, then you have to start working on the nostalgia, and it's a hell of a drug, right? But Masks is kind of a CW show, right? It's all about emotions, and it's about the interplay of the relationships and lives. And that's also kind of that same thing where it doesn't balance those classical superhero genre fans who want the beat 'em up. And I kind of think of two different kinds of superhero play, right? Which is the emotions and the relationships, and then you have that affecting the fight, and that's what may or may not let you win the battle, aka a lot of Spider-Man, right? Or the more punch 'em up, beat 'em up, Superman style game, right? So,
yeah. And I would say from games that I've run in the past, there's that almost you kind of fit into that niche quite quickly. The longest campaigns I've run of Marvel, of DC, etc., have been ones which are, they're about the people, they're about the characters, and the fights that you have with the villains are kind of the punch points between them. But it's more about the development of the characters and their relationships. When you look at long-running comic books, that's what keeps the good comic books going. Whereas then you get the other category, which is literal fight books. It is two characters pummeling each other, and it's smashing through walls. The Marvel 2-in-1s that that were done in the 70s and 80s, where it was just normally two superheroes fighting against each other, Hulk versus the Thing, for 32 pages, just smashing each other. And that can be an awful lot of fun, but it's going to be very short term in terms of what you can do in the narrative, because it is just going to be fight, 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 fight.
So
Yeah,
we talked about
Go ahead.
maturity and so forth. Can I toss in a couple other maybe contributing factors?
Of
Maybe
course.
hold. In fact, one is kind of probably uninteresting and not to talk about, which is just straight up licensing, right? Like people want to play the superheroes. There's a legal issue, right? People want to play the superheroes they know and love, or at least in the same world as them. And why aren't we playing Marvel Phase Rip today? Well, because Marvel decided to publish their own comic books and fuck over their license deal with. I mean, Marvel. TSR decided to publish their own comic books and fuck over their licensing deal with Marvel for no good reason at all. And so they got their license pulled, right? And then these games tend to often have, they get a license, they can only afford it for so many years, and then it just shrivels up, and then the game isn't supported anymore. So that may be holding back. Another thing that occurred to me was D&D does a great job, and a lot of the other fantasy games do a great job of doing the zero to hero dopamine treadmill, right? Where you start off as, a villager or whatever, and you get better and better, and every day you're looking at your character like, oh, I'll be 6th level, and then I'll have this spell or whatever. Whereas superheroes, they start off fully juiced up usually, or at least, most of the way. Different games have different ways of dealing with this, but I think if people play a superhero game and their starting superhero is weak, they don't love that. And if they're powerful, then they don't have the dopamine treadmill, right? So
yeah,
I don't know if that's an interesting thing to think about as well.
Yeah, and from personal experience, a lot of times people would get that kind of variation in power, because it's not just a case of the dopamine hit of of increasing in power, because you can get that from sort of almost just succeeding in missions and defeating the bad guy and doing that. But there is that element of having new toys to play with, of the thing of I've got this feat, I've got this new spell, I've got this new weapon or whatever, and you do get an element of that in superhero RPGs, but often it's more of a case of your powers might shift or change, and it's that classic cliche of come back in the next issue with a new costume and a new set of powers kind of thing. But I think that from my experience running long-term Marvel campaigns and Aberrant campaigns multiple years, that players will just rotate and change characters to get that hit, and so you'll get this kind of like, well, we used to kind of joke about it when we were teenagers, that it was like whatever character appeared in the comics as a new launch character, you'd almost get within the next couple of weeks someone would come to the table with, look, I've got this character who's not Ghost Rider with the numbers filed off, not Punisher, and so there's almost like that. But again, if you accept that rotating cast, that can be part of the trope of the comic book. That can feel quite in keeping with the genre, because the books do rotate cast members, because they want to sell more merch, or they want to support a struggling title by bringing a character in from another book or whatever it is. So you can almost have a nodding, knowing sort of wink to it and play with it. But yeah, it is absolutely a thing that there isn't. Most superheroes land on the page as a fully formed, this is what they're like. And yes, you can. There are systems that do that you can mature. You can start with your like junior New Mutant or Teen Titan character and watch them mature through the game, kind of thing. But it is, it isn't the norm. And absolutely, that is a thing. And I think we mentioned earlier about D&D is the power fantasy. A lot of fantasy games. I'm thinking of the Age of Sigmar RPG, Soulbound. I'm thinking of Exalted. I'm thinking of D&D. Your characters are superheroes. Yes, they're in a medieval faux setting, but they've got superpowers, whether it's feats or spells or charms or
Even
or whatever it
vampire,
might
right?
be. Yeah, yeah. So there is that kind of, I am playing a superhuman, and some of those worlds could be, superhero comics. I'm thinking of DC's Warlord, was a fantasy thing.
Red
Uh,
Sonja,
yeah,
Conan. These are
yeah.
big comics, really, relatively. But the thing that strikes me is, in a lot of comics, like you will have like Squirrel Girl hanging out with the Avengers, right? There,
Oh yeah,
you'll have like the super low powered and the super high power like hanging out, and this is super hard to do on the fly at the table, is to plan out, okay, I got Squirrel Girl and I got Iron Man, right? And they've got to go do a thing, right? For whatever reason. Like trying to plan out something because clearly Iron Man's going to get killed and then Squirrel Girl's going to save the day because that's how
yeah.
Squirrel Girl's story goes, right? But it's really difficult to get that kind of like, if you have all these varying like there's a while fantasy games, it's you do get to that superhero stage, right? Like above like 10th level or whatever, it's superheroes. It's very easy to like go, well, all these powers are focused in one direction, right?
Hmm.
But if you have these disparate random superpowers all over the place, it's very difficult to plan for that, right? You have to be very good at improving some things if you want to try and like, you got different power levels and you got different power types and like, and
And it's
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's what our gaming group um tended to refer to. The cliche we had was, "Who wants to play Hawkeye?" Because it's wow, you got arrows, great. Um, but it is a case of, there's an element of, you can talk about scenario design, you can talk about, making sure that, yes, you might be the Hawkeye in the group of Thor, Hulk, and Iron Man, but you know, making sure you're good at the thing you do. Um, but it is, again, systems handle it differently. I've not found one that handles it well. It has to really, a lot of that heavy lifting sits on the shoulders of the GM to manage it, and also to a certain extent to the players to make sure that they're conscious around the table of making sure that everybody gets equal screen time. And yes, Thor could lightning bolt that bloke off the top of the building, but this would be a good time for Hawkeye to do that while Thor does something else. And again, that is part of possibly what puts some people off, because it is a different type of, or it is something you have to be conscious of, cognizant of when you're running the games.
Yeah, and I think that the games that do the kind of framing the best generally like group all the heroes into one frame, right?
Hmm.
So like hit this hit the streets, defend the block, you're all street level heroes, right? You're all
Yeah.
like Daredevil and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones and that sort of like street level, like yeah, they're super powerful, but they're also like gonna go to their job afterwards, right?
Or they have some kind of system where it's like, oh, if you want street level heroes, here's your point buy to start, and if you want, mid tier heroes, here's your point buy.
But the problem with that is, and that's DC do. DC games used to do it that way, so you'd have a tier of character. The new Marvel system has a tier of character, but they've got a mechanic where you can mix different tiers in one group, which doesn't work, but that's another story. Um, the the thing is that even within tiers, and taking Aberrant as an example, where you've got the same kind of point buy to begin with, the powers and the mix of powers that you have are not created equal. Even if you've got, a wonderful connection of, this is a level 3 power, level 2 power, whatever, combinations of those and combinations of things, you know, can make characters who are equivalent as far as the system's concerned, widely different in their utility and their capability. And it also comes down to the old classic issue that we used to have playing Mage back in the day, of people who know a bit of science and a bit of understanding can use the mage spheres to do a whole host of shit that you weren't expecting. And it's the same with superpowers. Creative players who know a superpower, know, you know, what they could capable of, can do all sorts. It was often the same with, if you're playing published heroes in Marvel, there was always a thing of, if a character has done it in a comic, then, you know, it will be, you know, it's lower difficulty, or they've got that capability. You know, those who've read up could do all sorts of stuff with their characters. The powers that Superman has shown in the comics that you can cite as things he can do is amazing. But it's, you know, it is a problem with parity, even with those mechanically balanced, in inverted commas, systems. But it's also, let's think of it as a positive, it's also a huge creative opportunity for players to completely get mad with stuff that they can do. And that's great on the table, you know, but it's making sure that everyone on the table buys into it and understands it and is happy to kind of contribute and go with it, and understand that, you know, they're going to have their limelight, but it might not be every time.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just gonna say, like, the creativity piece, like, just having this conversation has got me thinking of like different comics and stuff, and like how, you know, the backgrounds, maybe as like a character when I'm playing superheroes again, or looking at that, like maybe building out my background to have some of those like interesting points, like Spider-Gwen and her grief or her concern over like basically leading to the death of Peter Parker. Like, you've basically killed your best friend. How does that impact your decision making as a superhero? Like, you may have some questionable like relationship with your superpowers, or even like Marvel introducing, you know, the universe rips, right? Like, if you're wanting to try out different superheroes, maybe that's a good, like, in universe like 62, this is where this is taking place, but like the time rips open, or the universe rips open, and you've got a portal to this nether, like, universe 49, and so everyone's over there playing different superheroes because the superheroes are different in that universe versus the one that you're in. So I think there's a lot of different creativity that you can certainly pull in, that I felt when I was playing, like Masks again is like my point of reference here. It just kind of like, after several sessions of playing, just started to feel flat, like we weren't like gonna be able to make this into a longer thing.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, I think I said on the Discord before, you know, although I started playing other games, when I found the Marvel Superheroes RPG, that was the main game that we played and ran in our group for years. And yes, I played other stuff, but that was an ongoing campaign that ran and ran and ran. And then after a break, when people came back from college and university, different Marvel system, but it was the continuity. It was the same campaign that picked up afterwards. And so most of my Marvel playing through all the different through all the different dice systems, rule systems, card systems, has been the same continuity of campaign. But about, you know, 5-10 years ago, I just reached saturation point. I just reached a point where it's just like, this is just like an ongoing comic that's been running 600 plus issues, and it's just like, I have to take a break from this. And I think, I mean, that's probably the same with any type of campaign, but I think I got very jaded by superheroes, and it was almost that thing of, and this might be again a contributing factor to why superhero games don't take off so well, is because supers are so formulaic. When you see the big budget movies, or you see the TV shows, or you see an ongoing comic, the themes repeat. It's the terrible kind of cliche with Marvel and DC, is that, you know, when Superman died, everyone knew he'd be back in a year, because you don't kill off the headliner like that. You know that it's just a storyline, it's just an arc. In recent years, when Captain America was revealed as an agent of Hydra, everyone, it hit mainstream news outlets, but everyone in the comics industry was just waiting with the ticking clock, waiting for it to be revealed that it actually wasn't, or it's a clone, it's a robot, it's a whatever it is, it's a double agent plot, whatever, because it has to return back to the standard form. It has to come back to the what sells the lunchboxes and the posters and that static status quo. And I think that is also a factor that puts a lot of people off, because it's like, it's just the same. It's just going to go back to normal. It's, returns back, and there isn't change. There isn't progress. There isn't long-term development. And I think that you can absolutely buck that trend in your own campaigns and on your own tabletops, but that's not how the form is presented. That's not the tropes. That's not the thing that people see. And I think that was part of just what stopped me running supers for a long time. It's just, I was kind of like, it's just the meat grinder. It's just the same old all the time.
Right. And I think that, there's a lot of to be said about like superheroes being agents of the status quo. Like they're oftentimes the villains in superhero stories are people that are trying to change something, and it probably is for the worse. Like oftentimes the villains are not sympathetic in any way, shape, or form, but they are trying to change things, and the superheroes are like, no, you're not, right? Even when maybe the supervillains have a point, that maybe they're right, oftentimes the hero is the one that's shutting them down, right? So you don't get like the opportunity to like kind of overthrow a kingdom, or or make the change. You're not change agents so much as like status quo keepers, and that can often be quite difficult. But
you can just say superheroes are cops.
well, yeah, I mean, there is a school of thought that superheroes are fascists. Like there is straight up as superheroes are fascist school of thought, but I think that's a little tiny bit of a stretch, except for Superman in a lot of comics. But go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Judge Dredd, but I mean, he's not a superhero, but yeah.
He's a comic book character, but he's not.
He's a comic book, yeah. And I think that's the thing. There is a difference between role-playing comic book characters and role-playing superheroes as well, because I think that's the other thing I would say, that some of that uptake on comic readership is because adults are kind of buying into the fact that other cultures have had for some time. You think of European comics and Asian comics, Korean and Korean, Hong Kong, and Japanese comics have always appealed to every sector of society. It's comics about everything. And I think that, British and American audiences are kind of picking up on that now, that you can have a comic book about emotions and feelings and other things to make it a mature comic. And I think that's part of where the comic book uptake is. Yes, superheroes will always be a big percentage of that. And I think that, we are talking here about, costume supers and even if the costume is a trench coat and an oversized gun, thank you, Rob Liefeld. But it's it is supers that we're talking about specifically, and I think that they are. I mean, for an example, when I ran the Marvel Civil War story that was done as a campaign book for the Marvel Cortex system that Margaret Weiss Productions did, which is a great system for superheroes. We had trouble with it as a group, I think, because there was no good side. Both the sides of that argument about whether supers should be regulated or not, neither side was comfortable for us as a group of players, because it was kind of, we knew there was going to be sort of the status quo was going to be restored and everything else, and it became quite difficult to play that to invest in that as a campaign, because no matter which side you were on, it didn't really sit right. it didn't feel like something that we could play enjoyably, other than just getting down to fighting people, which, there's a certain fun in just punching bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, it was like one side was trying to make things more fascist, the other side was trying to reset the status quo, and it was like, well, yeah. But anyways, a lovely conversation we've been having here. I'd like to, everybody, if you have a final thought or something you haven't gotten to, let's get to that. So let's start with Kayla and kind of come back around, and then we can get to the last question.
My final thought is this has given me a lot of creative ideas. I'm going to have to figure out which system to incorporate them in, though.
Right. And maybe that's a whole nother episode of FMRPG. Nolan?
Yeah, I don't have anything more.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Ben?
I think, unfortunately for my players, I think this has reignited what's good about Supers for me. So, sorry guys, Star Wars might be on a limited run. No, in all seriousness, yeah, it takes something like this to kind of refresh the clock sometimes and to think about it. But there is an awful, as Kayla says, there's an awful lot you could do. And I think if you haven't looked at a superhero game, by all means, hit me up on Discord and we can talk systems. But if you think about it from what makes superheroes good, that fact of there is a bit of, players enjoy the power. Yeah, great. There's a power kick. But when they're at their best, superhero stories are about the people and about the relationships and how the power impacts on them. That cliche, with great power comes great responsibility. But what does that actually mean? Think about that as just a role-playing motivation. There's an awful lot of great stories you can tell with the superhero genre. Whether you use a superhero role-playing system or you just have a wizard, sorcerer, magic user-based campaign in D&D where everybody's a spellcaster and it's superheroes just in a fantasy setting. There's an awful lot of great stories you can tell.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is, to me, while there's been some great games, I think this is somewhat of an untapped well. Someone's going to crack this and it's going to explode. And this is like a time bomb waiting to happen. I mean, I love, we didn't mention, but I love Tiny Supers. That's a lot of fun. It's very streamlined. It may be it just hasn't got enough exposure. But there's got to be a way to capture this Promethean fire of superheroes on the tabletop and have fun. But it may be that you have to have different games for different things, and it may diffuse. But it's got to be better than 0.4 of the market or whatever. I'm sure it's even better than that, but it seems to rate quite low. But anyway, Ben, do you have your D20?
I have my D20.
All right. I want you to roll and tell me the number, and we'll ask the last question. Likely, by the length of this list and who contributed questions, you're going to be asking yourself a question. So this is even better.
Okay, I got a 10.
A 10,
middle
yes.
of the table.
This is, yes, by the great Morden Crimson.
Oh, him again.
That guy. If you have a great idea for a campaign, but your players don't seem to be keen, apart from finding another group, what are good ways to sell the ideas to your group or getting their buy-in?
Right. Thumb screws. Hot matches under fingernails. No.
Geneva Convention legal ways of getting this done.
Oh, RBK. So, I think, and this, okay, let's relate this to superheroes in a way, because, you've got to get people's buy-in conceptually somehow. And so you've kind of got to, I think you have to try and find the things that they like and work around it. Do you remember when you read that book? That was fun, wasn't it? How about, we do that? Or, I think my players would probably say that I just get over enthusiastic and it's almost to shut me up. that they will play a game in order so that I get it out of my system. So maybe it's just be over enthusiastic, be the squirrel girl, and this is fantastic, this is brilliant. And I think, to be honest, when I pitched this question, I think in my head there was the element of, for most groups, the thing that you hear a lot is that, you know, being a GM is enough. If someone has got a game and they're going to bring it to the table, everybody else is almost so relieved that someone else is going to run for them that they'll just play whatever. But if you're getting resistance to a thing, I think you just got to look at what did they enjoy, what did the group like, and find the similarities. You know, you liked this game because it was system heavy. Well, we've got some crunch here. This is how you do it. If you're a min-maxer, then, you know, this is how you can play with it. If you're into the, you know, playing the angst tortured hero, these are the concepts you can play with. And it's hitting people where they are and what they like. And if you know your group and if you've played stuff with them before, then it's probably, you know, you're halfway there. But I think the other thing is, you know, it's always, you liked this, how about you try this? You know, that would be my rambling go-to.
Perfect. And I mean, also, if you just can't seem to crack it, write your blurb for your local con and go run the game at a local con, because it just get it out of your system. I agree that there's almost any way to get your group to find common ground and get a consensus, but sometimes they're just not interested in, you know, whatever that is. They're just not that kind of group. So there is a limit to everybody, I think.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
But thank you everyone for this lovely late night, early morning discussion, spirited discussion. Ben, is there anything you'd like to promote right now or suggest? Somebody you'd like to?
Well, the only thing I could probably think, if you search for me on DriveThruRPG, you'll find the mad rantings of things that I've put out in the past. Most of the published work that I've done is, unfortunately, and this goes back to licensing, is now no longer in production because EM Publishing lost the 2000 AD license. So most of my books you can find, but you'll find them secondhand. But yeah, I tend to write stuff for Fading Suns. I've written some stuff for the Amazingly Cheerful Engine, which is a rules light game that is kind of Saturday morning TV show, very parody, tongue-in-cheek stuff. I wrote the Bite Me supplement, which is kind of Scooby-Doo meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So you can find all that stuff on DriveThruRPG. But yeah, otherwise just keep listening to the show, because I love you guys.
Well, I appreciate that a great deal. And everyone should come on the Discord and talk sci-fi and superheroes with more good old Ben here, and it's a fantastic time. And I will link your drive-through page in the show notes, so you can go see what's up there that's still not been ruined by licensing agreements. Yeah, so I really appreciate Kayla and Nolan being up so late. Their time zone is worse than mine for talking to England, so I really appreciate you guys.
Nah, anytime.
All right, and thanks to patrons. Thank the patrons, Ben being one, not one, for supporting us. And I think we're getting some momentum again. So not in the pledges, which we've lost a few lately, but understandably so. But I think we need, the show is getting back on its feet, and I think we're moving forward. So if you could go ahead and go to patreon.com/fullmetalrpg, and you get access to the inner circle of the Discord, where the patrons get to give me as much or as little shit as they want, and or ask questions, because soon I'm going to have to start asking more questions for the last question, or when I'm not being lazy and I can ask them individual questions when we need more questions on a topic for the guest. So patreon.com/FullMetalRPG is very important to keep the show on the road, as it were. If you have anything you'd like to send me via email, fullmetalrpgbiz@gmail.com, or go to fullmetalrpg.com and look at our link tree and go to the Discord, and we have the merch. Like, I've got my two Titanic monsters fighting on my shirt today that says Full Metal RPG. That's a lot of fun. And we do put this on YouTube. If that's your thing, Full Metal RPG official on YouTube.
Just subscribe on YouTube, just fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing pretty well, but I mean, I think there's no way we're anywhere near some sort of button showing up. So, but you can see my stupid beard that I've just trimmed and all our lovely faces. So, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Right.